So, good afternoon, Thomas. Good afternoon, viewers and listeners. This is a special opportunity for us to talk with Brother Thomas about his thesis work, and particularly because it aligns well with the work that we do at the Missionary Oblate U.S. Province JPIC office here in Washington. So, Thomas, why don't you tell us about what the title of your thesis is, and maybe say a few words about yourself.
Okay. Let's see. So I completed this thesis back in the fall of 2023, and it was titled Investigating the Potential of Engaging the Catholic Community of San Antonio, Texas in Sustainable Interventions. It's kind of a mouthful, as thesis titles usually are, but yeah, we'll get into the details of it later. And like you said, Father Séamus, my name is Thomas Marchetti. I guess primarily why I'm here is because I graduated from Texas A&M in 2023, and now I'm with the Oblates of Mary Immaculate as I'm a pre-novice at the moment. So I'm in initial formation, pre-novices. I was born and raised in Texas. I was born in New Braunfels, which is just up the road from San Antonio.
Oh, just north of San Antonio, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And but I spent kind of my high school years in East Texas, and my junior high school years. So it's kind of the second half of my childhood in East Texas, and so the rural Piney Woods area, that was familiar to me. Before I went off to Texas A&M to get my degree in biological and agricultural engineering.
And tell us about that background you have up today. It looks like very farming-like or country-like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was I was looking for backgrounds today. I was looking through my pictures, and this is actually from, I believe it's from a pilgrimage that I took in Spain. So this is the Spanish countryside that we're looking at. So it's probably like maybe grape vineyards or something in the far background and a field in the foreground. Yeah.
Well, it's perfect. It's perfect for a sustainability discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure many of the viewers would like to know what inspired you to focus on your particular thesis for engaging the Catholic community in San Antonio in sustainability efforts.
Sure. So like I said, I was born in New Braunfels, which is pretty close to San Antonio. So and then later in life, I ended up actually working in San Antonio, at the Basilica of the Little Flower there. So the area is kind of familiar to me. The area is familiar to me, and my, I guess, love for the Catholic Church had grown in my years as a bachelor student at Texas A&M. They have a really great Catholic Student Association and Student Center there. And combining all of that, whenever I ended up going back for my master's degree in 2021, I approached my advisor. I kind of wanted to bring all of these interests, this background all together as I did my thesis, and to my maybe surprise, but delight, my advisor was actually very agreeable and encouraging of the idea. He has also done studies in San Antonio, so it kind of worked out that both of us had connections there. And so, yeah, it just kind of took off from there.
And so I guess sustainability isn't a theme that falls off the lips easily, and certainly not for many people. They think mostly about what they're doing at the moment and what they're supposed to do tomorrow, and whether it's on eating, drinking, or other things, are putting gas in their car or doing whatever job they're doing. I'm not sure that sustainability is something that's at the top of the list of their criteria. We've come to recognize it as being important, but say a few words about how sustainability caught your imagination.
Sure. Yeah, reflecting on this is kind of going back to my childhood. I was thinking about how really important, um, well, I'll just say I grew up in a family of 7 children, so
Sure.
um,
Same here.
doing things economically was pretty important. Grew up on My dad was a high school math teacher. My mom stayed at home and took care of us. So yeah, like I said, doing things economically was important for us. As well as kind of getting outside. That was really crucial in my upbringing as well. My dad always had us help him have raise vegetable gardens. We would usually go on camping trips as our summer vacations. So we kind of grew in love of nature and creation in that way, and really stewardship of natural resources. Um, so yeah, whenever I was thinking about my degree, whenever I went to college, I really wanted to bring those interests together in my university studies, and which is how I ended up getting into partially how I ended up getting into biological and agricultural engineering. Kind of the rural life aspect to it. I was a member of the FFA in high school, to the Future Farmers of America, and yeah, kind of the love of nature and really wanting to preserve that. I was also reflecting at the end of my high school, I think it was about 2011, Texas had one of the worst droughts, well, that I remember since I've been alive. We had a massive wildfire that was in Bastrop, which is not too far away from San Antonio. Um, and yeah, it was really kind of sad for me. And I was thinking, I don't know, I see these things on the news about how global warming and climate change is happening, and I kind of want to make a difference in that way.
Uh-huh. And so you, at some point along the line, you were introduced to Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si.
Mm-hmm.
And as I know from our work in Washington with different companies, it's a text that has inspired many people from all walks of life, because it asks some very fundamental questions about the earth, the planet. Are we taking care of it just for ourselves or for future generations? So tell us about your encounter with Laudato Si and the Laudato Si action platform.
Sure. Yeah, so Laudato Si was published in 2015, which is right at the end of my bachelor's degree. At that time, I wasn't really big into reading church texts, but I do remember seeing it, and I did read it a little bit. And I was thinking, well, this really falls in line with a lot of things that I've already been working. The technical aspects of it, of Laudato Si, were things that I was already familiar with from my studies, and
Sure.
so yeah, it's like, well, this is in line with like kind of science, and that was interesting to me. Um, and I was actually, yeah, I was in formation with the Franciscans, so Saint Francis was close to my heart, and Laudato Si is a poem of Saint Francis, and um, yeah, so kind of the whole God and ecology and holiness, including nature. That was sort of my first encounter with it. And it wasn't until about 6 years later in 2021, whenever I went back for my master's degree, that it really, I guess I'd reflected on it a lot more. I'd read more of the work and thought this could really be something that I spend my academic research kind of delving into. Um, and it wasn't until about 2 years into my master's program that I was kind of trying to find, well, how do I find a concrete connection between the science and the church aspect of my studies, and that's whenever I kind of encountered the Laudato Si action platform, and things kind of fell into place from there.
Excellent. Very good. Yeah, no, that was obviously the science on climate change and the science on biology or on the planet or on all of those things have been around for a while and have engaged a lot of people's attention. But with Laudato Si, Pope Francis tried to bring a spiritual dimension, a theological dimension into that whole framing, because we know he goes back there into talking about the book of Genesis and the responsibility that's given to all of humanity to care for the planet and to mind it, and not mind it just for ourselves, but to mind it also for future generations.
Right.
It's some ways a different challenge that we're facing now as more and more people try to get into this, but it requires dedication, requires scientific research, so that we make good choices going forward. And you said the Laudato Si Action Platform. Have you connected much with what they're doing? It's basically an effort to motivate church institutions and Catholics around the world to pick out some actions that they might do that would be in fulfillment of the call of Laudato Si, right?
Right. So whenever I was kind of getting into my thesis research, the 7 different levels of the kind of Laudato Si engagement as far as individual and church communities, hospitals, and all the different kind of organizational levels that Laudato Si, the action platform, engages. That was all in mind. And I actually used the suggested actions from the Laudato Si action platform website to help formulate the basis of my analysis for my thesis. So yeah, and also what the 7 kind of Laudato Si goals. I know there's 7, and some of them are spiritual and kind of educational and kind of community resilience. But the ones that I focused on more, since I was looking at it more from the scientific engineering perspective, was more about the individual sustainability and of yeah, responding to the cry of the earth. Those are the 2 that I really focused on as far as Laudato Si goals.
And one of your goals that you state is about engaging the Catholic community in San Antonio in sustainability efforts. How did you land on that?
So my, like I said, my advisor had started some related work in San Antonio before, and he had looked into agencies and what he calls stakeholders and water,
Sure.
energy, and food areas, and he had himself already started to do a kind of like an engagement workshop to try to get these different stakeholders to talk to each other. And so I thought, well, I'll just take that and I'll use that and bring that into maybe a parish setting.
Uh-huh. So did you find fertile ground, or did you have much experience with connecting with Catholics in parishes or institutions around San Antonio?
Yeah, right now that aspect of my work is still theoretical.
Sure.
Yeah. It and I've attended a lot of, well, yeah, I've learned a lot through the Laudato Si Action platform that they publish webinars, and engaging kind of the leadership is a very important thing, to have a pastor that's on board to doing this work, so that I can maybe get a group together at a parish level and actually talk to people about yeah, sustainability and the Catholic dimension of that.
So you also mentioned in there that there are some particular challenges in the environmental world related to Texas when it comes to energy, when it comes to water, when it comes to food and stuff like that. Say a little bit more about what those are.
Okay. Well, I think in San Antonio, because we're going to be very San Antonio centric here,
That's all right. Go to it.
but in San Antonio, I think the most obvious challenge is with water. San Antonio gets probably around 30 to 35 inches of rain every year, and very often they're under different levels of drought protocol as far as watering their lawns, and maybe once a week or only by bucket or something like that. About 50% of the water comes from the Edwards Aquifer, which is beneath San Antonio. The rest, the remaining portions, come from other aquifers that are surrounding. Very little actually comes from surface water. So the awareness of that is pretty strong in San Antonio. One of the interesting things that I learned in my study was that about 15% of the San Antonio water comes from, they pump at about 150 miles from near Caldwell, Texas. So it's from a totally different aquifer. So that's a major challenge in water. As far as food, I wasn't able to get necessarily San Antonio centric data, but found out that as far as the United States level, which is kind of the level of data I could find, yeah, every individual is accountable for about 2,500 calories of food a day, but about 400 or 500 of those calories are from sugars, so maybe not very useful as far as nutrition. And on top of that, about 20 to 30% of our food that we could eat, edible food, is wasted. So that's a challenge as well to think about. As far as energy, yeah, right now I think only about 30% of the Texas grid is from sustainable energy, so either solar or wind, or maybe even to a small extent hydro or biomass.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen in the news over the past few years, you've had some terrible winter storms that have impacted the electricity supply in the San Antonio area.
That's
And
true.
at the same time, quite a lot of resistance to at least sourcing some of the energy from alternatives, right? We obviously know
Right.
Texas is famous for its oil out there in West Texas and
Of
other
course.
parts. But even when it comes to solar or wind or geothermal, they they've got a footprint in Texas, but it's not a very big one.
Sure. Yeah, that's developing as well because San Antonio, or not San Antonio, but Texas is now the the leading producer of solar and wind energy in the United States. So, I mean, we have plenty of land for it. There's no problem there, and we have plenty of sunlight as well.
Uh, and you've also got a fairly big agriculture industry, right?
I'd say a family agriculture
No,
industry.
a fairly big
Oh,
farm
yes, for
industry.
sure. Yeah, I mean, cattle is the number one agricultural production in Texas, but I mean, there's all kinds of agriculture in the state. In my county where I grew up in East Texas, there's actually a high amount of nurseries. But I mean, there's sheep, there's goats, there's corn, mostly feed corn, but some wheat production to a lower level, and definitely cotton in the West Texas area around Lubbock.
So, okay, a huge, well, obviously, we all know that Texas is huge. So there's a big platform there and lots of diversity within the state. I was struck that in some part, and maybe in the early introduction or in the abstract, you talked about how conscious people need to be of what they're eating. And you even mentioned plant-based protein over against meat-based protein.
Hmm.
And a lot of the questions that we have with big corporations is to take a look at dealing with the kind of calories or the kind of proteins that they need to have in daily diet or in their stores or in school lunches and things of that sort. But many people find that to be a difficult transition because they're so used to whether it's goats or cattle or lambs or hogs. That's where if there isn't some of that on the plate somewhere, they feel like they're not getting adequate nourishment.
Yeah, and I mean, culturally, Texas has the history of being a cattle producing state, so it feels kind of like, I guess, patriotic or state pride to continue to support the cattle industry. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, it uh, producing plant protein versus animal protein takes less resources in general, water for sure, and produces less carbon emissions, which are things that we're interested in as far as advancing sustainability.
Yeah, and lots of I've noticed obviously there is a huge, I don't know if it's right to call it huge, but there is a significant growth. I live in the city here in Washington, but lots of efforts to go at restaurants from farm to table, and farmers markets, and even people trying to cultivate their little plots of land that's manageable for them, but that's appropriate to the area and what they can grow. So that's also proves promising up in this corner for nutrition, if not just for good eating and for taste, but for nutrition as well.
Yeah, the study that I used to kind of look at a theoretical method as far as what a shift in a diet would look like, it was produced by something called Lancet, but the study, it didn't completely eliminate animal protein from the diet. It just reduced it drastically from kind of what are the level that we're used to. So yeah, I mean, and just that significantly reduced carbon emissions from
Sure.
the food production or the food consumption that we do.
And I think just because of our nature, sometimes when we're so technologically addicted, we're always looking for a magic button that we can push so that we can go from, meat-based diet to a plant-based diet overnight. And nobody's
Right.
asking for 100% conversion. I think it's a matter of trying to blend those two together, like it is in many instances. The answers are in taking energy from lots of different sources, but doing it in a way that's environmentally appropriate.
Right.
So since you're a good scientist, tell us a little bit about the methods you use to gather data.
Okay, I'll do my best. Well, since this study involves, well, the San Antonio area, which is about 2 million people, but the Catholic population in particular, which is about 400,000 people, it was practically impossible for me to, I guess, sample each person individually as far as what their water, energy, and food intake was. So in order to kind of come to an approximation of that, I had to look into data at different levels. Some were national, some were state level, some are a little bit more regionalized or local. But as far as like food data, I had to, there's a report published by the United States Department of Agriculture that kind of shows what's the food production in the United States, and what just have to divide it between the amount of people to get kind of an average diet. As far as water, there's the San Antonio Water Service, SAWS, which has more detailed data about the amount of water on a city level that the people are using, and they can divide that into residential versus businesses and things like that. So they gave a number for the amount of water that people consume on a daily basis, which is about 111 gallons per day. So I got that data from. Yeah, the San Antonio Water Service has pretty detailed data about where the water sources come from, whether it's from this aquifer, that aquifer, from Canyon Lake up the road, or from, the Trinity aquifer from near Caldwell. So that's kind of where I got that from. I had to find some residential data as far as like, do people use their water for in their sinks and their toilets and their washing machines, to kind of, that was from a more private scientific study that I found that data. So some of the data that I got came from kind of national agencies, others came from
Sure.
scientific literature. Yeah, the energy data came from like it's the EIA. It's kind of a National Energy Information Administration, and from the National Department of Energy, as well as from the local San Antonio utility service, which is the CPS, which kind of delineates where the local energy comes from as far as natural gas versus coal versus nuclear versus wind versus solar.
Sure.
So those are some of my data sources. It's there's a mishmash of a lot of different
Sure.
things that I had to bring together.
I don't imagine many of us want to be known as bureaucrats sitting behind a desk collecting data, but it's when you're trying to do the study that you're doing, and when you're trying to aggregate it and analyze it, we realize that collecting that data, whether it's about electricity or about water or about food, is really important if we're going to make good decisions.
Right.
And having those bureaus around, or those supercomputers or whatever, I think our big discussion now these days is about data centers. And I know in Virginia next door here and up in this part of the country, it's all about the amount of energy that data centers use. And so trying to balance, how much data do we need? And is it going to overwhelm us? And at some point, just like a lot of data overwhelms us in many different areas, but we have to be able to break it down or to analyze it. Any particular challenges you encountered in your analysis or with the data stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, it's really hard to find local data that's like particular to a local area.
So they don't
Um,
break it down according to the zip code.
no, not usually. No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just sort of had to extrapolate, approximate, um, assume that what's happening at a national or state level is close enough to what's happening in San Antonio, which may or may not be true, since San Antonio does have a unique culture versus other parts in the state of Texas. Um,
And you've
yeah,
got a nice river running through there
right,
that everybody knows about, right?
right. Yeah, the San Antonio River. Hmm.
Well, I think it's, when I think of all the data that's collected either at the town level or the street level or the county level or at the state level, most of us grew up looking at, huge rivers that are flowing 24 hours a day, out of which people draw water and could draw water as long as it
Hmm.
was drinkable or as long as they could use it. But obviously, much of that has gone by in much of the country because now uh, many of those rivers are polluted, but also many of those rivers have been causing excessive flooding in different places. So, how to manage that and how to at the same time put it over against the kind of, measuring the kind of water that people need for daily life, whether it's eating, drinking, cooking, personal care, etc. It's a big challenge.
Right.
Indeed, indeed. Um, Tell me a little bit more in terms of your own, I guess, any reactions you get from folks when on your thesis topic or your thesis points that you put out there, family, friends, fellow students.
Yeah, we kind of just joke about it.
Well, tell us somebody in what way.
Well,
It's, I mean, most people like to talk about sports, Thomas,
right. Yeah, yeah.
and it's whether it's basketball or football. We have a season for everything. I'm not sure that
Hmm.
there's a sustainability season.
Right, yeah. So honestly, I didn't talk about it to a lot of people because I just thought, this data is kind of boring, and maybe sustainability, it's not really a fun topic to talk about either. But I did have some family and friends come to my thesis presentation, And yeah, I don't really know how, didn't really talk about how we felt about, they
Sure.
felt about yeah, I know my family has expressed that environmental stewardship is an important part of our lives and is a Catholic thing, so there's support there. As far as like getting into the nitty-gritty of things, it's kind of like, well, yeah, do the analysis and come back to us, I guess.
Well, I'm
And
surprised now, even here in Washington, sitting at table with the community here and with others in family, how many people are much more attentive to reading the labels on the food that they bought at the store,
mm-hmm.
right? Because they want to know about the sugar content, they want to know about the different minerals that are in there, they want to know about its benefits,
Yeah.
etc. So that has definitely changed in the last 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I hope that whatever I did helped to bring some kind of awareness to whoever I talked to it about.
And so, in terms of how it connects with your faith, can you say a few more words about that? Or I know from you already talked a little bit about growing up with your family and your experiences there. But how has your faith grown in this whole question of sustainability and care of creation?
Okay. Um, yeah, I'll do my best. Like I said, kind of respecting the nature was important. Um, and environmental stewardship was definitely important for my family. Um, yeah, I don't ever remember it really being talked about in church or like catechism much. So as far as developing that connection a little bit stronger,
Mm-hmm.
that would come a little bit later. Like I said, I was associated with the Franciscans,
Sure.
and St. Francis was an important part of my life. So trying to draw that connection between ecology, St. Francis being the patron saint of ecology, and our faith, that's something that I thought about a lot at that point in my life, and really kind of pondering this poem Laudato Si, where he's praising God with and for all the different elements of creation, from the water to the wind to the sun to the fire and the moon and everything. Um, so yeah, that sort of showed me that, the creation around me can be a means of praising God. As far as kind of connecting it with maybe more concrete practices, that wouldn't have come until, like I said, I got into my master's program and
Sure.
I discovered the Laudato Si Action platform. I attended a lot of Laudato Si Action platform webinars and learned more about what they were trying to do. I filled out kind of for my own exercise. I've completed a Laudato Si action plan for myself, just to kind of think about my daily life and what am I actually doing to kind of promote a better integral ecology, as Pope Francis kind of called it,
Sure.
as far as integrating life of faith with kind of practice. Mm-hmm.
And for so many, and it's been mentioned many times by great theologians, that the primary revelation of God to us is creation.
Mm-hmm.
And he entrusts it to our care, so that in the beauty of creation, but also in the fact that it nourishes us, feeds us, provides us with the sustenance that we need to continue living and to take care of others,
Mm-hmm.
that's the primary revelation of, that is followed by his revelation in his son Jesus Christ and in the saints and in the liturgy. But it's also interesting to follow that in the life of the church, particularly
Mm-hmm.
in liturgy, creation plays a great role.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the feast days, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Easter, the Vigil, all of that, they're all set by the lunar calendar, right, and the solar calendar. By the
Mm-hmm.
we count the days, we mark them days. In the past, because so many people lived in the country, there were different rogation days where there were prayers for a good harvest, where there were prayers for a good spring planting. So that was built into the prayers. We don't see it as much anymore now because so many of us live in cities and drive around in cars, and we don't get to see what's going on in the countryside very often. So that's a huge root of the traditional church as well. As you've alluded to, Saint Francis was a great apostle for that, and he's continued to remind us about that.
Right. Yeah, and I think once I got into kind of the Laudato Si action platform and thinking about, I guess maybe trying to justify bringing faith into this work about sustainability, I was paying a lot more attention to how many times creation or elements of creation are mentioned even in scripture. Definitely at the beginning of Genesis for sure, but throughout the Psalms, there's so many mentions to water and light and so on and so forth.
Well, because so much of them are the essential ingredients of life, and that was the way in which people survived from day to day. So they thank God for the rain, or they thank God for the harvest, or there was a real connection of their dependence on the Almighty to sustain them, but also for them to mind and to take care of the earth. And we're slowly but surely, I think, becoming much more aware of the fact that we haven't done such a good job. We've often taken the easiest way out, or sometimes we want a short-term solution to what needs to be a long-term plan or strategic plan, right? To make this happen.
Right. Yeah, not just thinking about our own generation, but generations to come and so on.
Well, you've got lots of allies out there, Thomas. We in the office, we got a note not long ago from an oblate scholastic in the Philippines.
Okay.
He's in his 4th year of theology, and he's from the Cameroon in Africa, and in West Africa, but he's doing some studies in Manila for a while at the moment. But he saw an empty lot over there, and all of a sudden he decided, well, we ought to do something with this empty lot, and turned it into a garden, a vegetable garden. He sent along some pictures of what he's been doing and how that's Laudato Si has been his guide and his inspiration, and that he hopes to integrate into his ministry in the future. So that's one example. We've got a number of oblates in the U.S. province, but beyond as well, who, even though they're not in rural communities, they are looking for whatever little plots of land that they may be around where they can do some planting. They can plant flowers, they can make herbal gardens, they can gather the local parish community and create a garden club. Or in Sacred Heart in Oakland, we've got a group, the Green Team, that are hugely into cleaning up the area around the parish and the church and the neighborhood. So 2 or 3 times a year, they have a special organizing effort around cleanup of trash and cleanup of the streets and of all of the other areas around where people live, so that they are indeed able to enjoy more of creation. So, and there are many examples out there, is I think what I want to say, and that that you can certainly, if this is part of your future ministry, connect with. Our work here in Washington is, for the most part, it's with the government, which is right down the street, but also with corporations, because there's all of the companies that are out there that are involved in the production of food, processing food, trying to limit the processing, putting antibiotics in some of the meats that they serve. There's a long list of issues that companies that are sometimes trying to make a profit, and they're taking the easy way out, but that's not a very healthy diet for people to be taking care of themselves, but also to be feeding to their children. You got any hopes at the moment or dreams in terms of, after you've finished your studies, etc., you would like to be involved with?
I'm also, at the moment, I'm connected as well with a group called the Laudato Si movement, which is global, but especially with the Texas chapter. They're very active with advocacy right now, because there's the Texas Congress is in session at the moment, and so they went to an advocacy day a few days ago
Oh, up in Austin.
up in Austin. Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that I guess we'd like to see is the Laudato Si movement is to really see, as you mentioned, all these examples of how Laudato Si is coming to life in different communities. It would be great to see that happen more and more in parishes across Texas.
Yeah.
And there's so many aspects to Laudato Si as far as just being aware of maybe the resources that the parishes use, as far as can be as much as what irrigation systems they use to water their lawns, or maybe forming a different type of landscaping that doesn't need irrigation around the parish building.
Sure.
Or just something to help people to grow an awareness of maybe how the church uses resources, but how themselves and their individual lives use resources, and just to be kind of more aware, just to grow an awareness and to try to slowly come to a conversion.
Yeah, no, and that's important. And there's some great examples of, I know I have a number of colleagues and friends here in Washington. They're probably at this stage in their life, they're in their 40s. But they've never owned a car, right? They mostly get around by public transportation, or in many instances, they just bike to something. And sometimes it'll take them 30 minutes on a bike or whatever, but they tell me that handles some of their exercise needs, as well as, convenience, but also not adding to the climate problems that we face, and the traffic jams that we sit in.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be huge interventions necessarily. It can be small things, like you said, just changing the way that we transport to work, whether we carpool more, or take public transportation, or bike or walk if we can. Yeah, to just not letting our faucets run needlessly. Sure. Yeah, it can be little things.
Well, this has been great, Thomas. You've probably are you coming towards the end of semester? I'm not sure what your calendar is on.
Yeah, it's about a month left now.
Month left?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope your future studies go well.
Thank you.
And exams, do they still have exams?
Yes, we do. Yeah, I do.
What's your favorite subject at the moment?
I'm taking a contemporary philosophy class right now, and the professor has been very creative in how we go about learning contemporary philosophy. So right now, yeah, we're reading a novel that is surreal. It's not it's not strictly a philosophical novel.
Sure.
But it's been great to discuss kind of philosophical concepts as far as what's happened in contemporary history. And so that class has been really interesting for me at the moment.
Do you have any favorite contemporary philosophers? There's a few, there's more than a few to pick from.
Yeah. I said, the professor's been non-traditional, so maybe there's not a traditional philosopher that I could say is my favorite at the moment. But as far as I'm going to go maybe a non-traditional route, and say John Paul II.
Sure. Okay. And philosophy is a way that trains us and trains our minds to ask good questions, right? And to think in terms of short term, but long term, but also to engage quite a number of different subjects and put together a world vision out of that. And they also prove to be good interrogators of ideas that we have that may need some improvement and may need some modifications, right?
For sure.
Well, great. Well, this has been a great opportunity to get to know about your thesis and your background, and to wish you well in the rest of the semester.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, God bless, Thomas.
Thank you. God bless.